What's up, everyone? Welcome to another Team Kitchen Fable video. I'm Jacob. I'm joined by my teammates Jasiel and Tyler Broughton. And
Hello,
today we're going to
hello.
be going through some of our experience with Road to Nationals. So I got first at mine, Jasiel got second, and Tyler also got second. Jasiel and mine were actually at the same one, and Tyler was at a store in South Carolina, right? Yep.
Correct.
So we all had pretty good time with draft. We're just gonna kind of talk about how it was, talk about key takeaways from draft, maybe things we're gonna learn going forward. If you're looking forward to it, go ahead and keep watching, but also drop a like and subscribe if you want, and leave a comment on maybe other topics you want us to talk about in the future. And we appreciate you guys watching. Tyler, you can start us off. Why don't you tell us about your overall experience with the event? What were the decks you drafted? What were some of the things that like helped you succeed in the end? How did it all go in general?
Yeah, so I went in with my strategy. I was gonna force Iyslander for at least the first draft and see how it went. Because I'm a believer if you force Iyslander early, then you're gonna get rewarded later. And it's easier to pivot out of it than it is in it. And so my first draft, I drafted Iyslander, and I was getting all the ice cards, so I just kept with it, and I got rewarded heavily. Um, and then my second draft, I also drafted Iyslander because I've been playing at the store. It was my home store, so playing at the store a long time. Past couple weeks, doing lots of drafts with everyone. I knew the people in my pod. And I knew that they weren't going to go Iyslander, so I was comfortable forcing again. And then finally in the top eight, I drafted Dromai because I figured people knew I was going to draft Iyslander, so they were gonna um, maybe they would have changed the way they drafted, and so or hate drafted me or whatever. So I decided to go draw my, especially because I got two dragons right off the bat, so decided to stick with it. But yeah, overall, it was a successful day. Um, I lost two as Iyslander, won four, and then lost in the finals as Dromai to Phi, who spanked my butt because it's not a great matchup for Dromai. I also was leaking a lot of damage, and that finals match, I actually decided that my big play was going to be an Arsenal Toma Firebrand because I had three Aether Ashwings out, and I was going to do a big Toma Firebrand turn to like maybe try to win. Next turn, he killed all three Aether Ashwings. Like I wasn't expecting him to do that. Like he already had the momentum. Like why did he have to kill my dragon? So
Yeah.
um, it was a successful day. My strategies paid off, and I just love drafting Uprising.
And you guys had you had two pods, 3 rounds each, drafted the standard format, right?
Yep, yeah, we had 17 players.
Nice.
Yeah, did 3 rounds and then had another draft and three more rounds in top eight.
Nice. Yeah, I think Hasiel ours had like between 20 and 30. No, we had six. Oh, we had 21, I think, because we had two pods of 8, and then unfortunately there was a pod of 5. But yeah, how did our event go? I should say our event, but how did it go for you specifically? I'll talk about after you.
Yeah, thankfully, I think I was lucky enough to be in all three pods where I was always an 8. I wasn't
Yeah.
in the one of the uneven pods. Um, the first two pods were kind of like strange though, because like I had actually been able to draft all three heroes. You know, it was Iyslander first, then Dromai, but no, yeah, Iyslander, Vi, then Dromai, but Iyslander was difficult. I was actually kind of anxious drafting Iyslander because I actually thought I was sending the right signals, and also receiving the right signals. And then Pack 2 things had changed, where basically like two other people had forced Iyslander and did not read the signals. And that I was actually kind of proud of myself actually in that draft situation, because even though like I was kind of dealing with a draft pod that wasn't exactly doing what they were supposed to do, I still managed to like draft appropriately to still like manage to run an Iyslander deck to then like win, like get 2 wins in that pod, losing only in the last round of that pod. And me being the Iyslander that was passing to them, I happened to be the strongest Iyslander, so that was good on my end going Iyslander in that situation. So that was one I was comfortable forcing with, just like how Tyler is comfortable forcing Iyslander in that kind of first pod, and the situations aligning. Um, Second pod was even weirder though, because By pick 2, pack 1, all the Dramai stuff had disappeared, like, completely. Like, I remember even picking, like, me and, like, one of our locals, Jonathan Owens, was, like, also picking Dramai, I believe, in the beginning. And then out of nowhere, it was just like, oh, it's all gone. So we have to pivot now. Somebody's got to pivot to something. And I know pivoting to Iyslander would be the worst thing to do right now. And the best hero, I feel, in my opinion, to pivot to when things go awry is just Fi. So I decided to go Fi. And that also kind of rewarded me as well to pivot to that, just because you could still do pretty well with Fi, even when people scrambling with it. And so I also got 2 wins with it, and then lost in the 3rd round. And then eventually that was enough to get me to top 8, getting those going for 2. And then drafted Dramai. And I learned in that pod, though, never pass Heatwave, because Heatwave makes such a big difference, especially if you even decide to go Fi. Like, it's kind of insane card. You don't want your opponent to have it, and you want yourself to have it. So, and then, I saw you in the finals, and the Heatwave got it destroyed everything. It ruined everything for me.
Yeah, no, for me, the first pod I was in, I drafted Fi. I think it was the normal story of open a good Fi card in pack 1, watch the next 2 packs, none of the ninja stuff was disappearing, and then just commit immediately. For when I draft Fi, I don't generally go for the Phoenix Flame synergies, so I was just picking like all the 0 for 3 go again, all the 1 for 4 go again, and then a couple Chain Enders. I had like no Flame Call Awakenings, no Inflames or anything like that. I think I had like 1 Burn Away as a finisher, but that was just the way that I ended up drafting. It ended up being very consistent for me in the first pod, and I was able to go 3-0 with that. But then in the second pod, Jasiel, you and I were in the same one for that one. I was to your right, and I was also drafting Dromai. But this is an actually interesting thing that can happen in Uprising. In our second pod, there must have been like at least 10 or 12 6-power poppers in the pool across the entire thing, specifically in pack 1. So what happened was the signals were very weird because everyone was picking the generics and the rares, and no one could figure out early on what people were going. So the signals were very hard to read. I ended up going with Dromai just because there was a couple strong Dromai cards, and I wanted to. I think I noticed there was 1 pack with the ninja card missing, so I switched into Dromai. But Dromai is my least confident hero, so I didn't do very well in that pod. But luckily, the 3-0 from pod 1 set me up to be strong. But like I think in the second pack of that draft, I opened a foil and non-foil Red Brothers in Arms in the same pack. And I also got like a Thaw, which is a Majestic 6. So, like the 6s were just everywhere. And for that reason alone, I actually think if you see a lot of 6s going by you, if you're not picking them, you might want to consider heavily pivoting off of Dromai, because I think the format is balanced around 6s being like a little bit less common. So Dromai can be powerful. But if your opponent just has it every time, it's like impossible to play as Dromai unless you like have a very low red line like draconic build that doesn't rely on the Centipies and the dragons. But yeah, so I didn't do as well in that pod. But then in the top 8 pod, I was, I think, second or third seed, and I decided to force Fi. But I knew if I didn't see any Fi, if I saw the Fi cards being taken, I was going to consider pivoting off. But the reason you can force Fi in the top 8, being the highest seed, is that you get to pick if you're going first or second. So if you're going against Iyslander, you go first. If you're going against the Mirror or Dromai, you go second. And that helped me. I had my first round was against a Dromai that I went second. My second round of top 8 was against a Fi. And going second actually mattered because their deck was very strong as well. I had a key turn where I had a blue trade-in that I gave go again with Tide Flippers because I had 3 blues in hand. So I was able to send the blue trade in from hand and switch a blue into a red. That helped me keep momentum, and going second was the only reason I was able to do that. But I did end up with a pretty strong deck. And then, yeah, my finals was against Jasiel. And he got a red Rake the Embers on turn 0. And maybe this was not the right move, but I said, okay, you got a red Rake turn 0. I'm just not going to touch your dragons for the rest of the game because that's just busted. So I was like, if I'm gonna die to dragons, it's like gonna happen no matter what. You got a red Rake turn 0, but Yeah, I went face the whole game, and I died. I mean, I beat him with like there was like 6 dragons on the board, but there were 2 turns in a row where if you were like lucky enough to have a 0 whatever red with go again, I was gonna die instantly because I was on 1 life for like 3 turns. So it was very risky. I think the RNG was probably on my side for that one, unfortunately for Jasiel, but it was still a very hard fought battle. Like the people that were watching said that was a really good game, and it was fun for me as well. But yeah, I think that was a overview of how my draft went. But Hasiel, what were the main things that you were studying and trying to focus on going into the draft? Like what were your preparations? Like what were the main things that you were trying to keep in mind going to the draft RTN?
Yeah, definitely before also going into the draft RTN, I remember just visiting Tyler and we were just like cramming draft sessions at Compete Sport. And that helped me out a lot because I don't think I knew how to draft at all. Like when Ario was at, I don't think I knew how to draft well. Like the whole concept of drafting, I did not know how to do. And I think Uprising, I just learned how to draft for the first time. And that said, doing that whole like training arc essentially, and like it felt cool. So thanks to Tyler for that. Um, and one thing that the first thing that kind of came to mind that was super helpful was recognizing what signals I'm sending. Because thankfully too with Uprising, this set is like it's much more easier to send signals, and the signals are just more apparent in general. So I think that also aids like let's say less experienced drafters as well to recognize like, oh, this is gone, kind of like this is very more apparent. It's not always going to be the case, but the likelihood increases because of that. And so just kind of like strats, like, like I look at my pack one, I'm like, oh, I have like a pack full of great Iyslander cards, but I know it's not going to come back to me because everyone else is going to be picking from them. So then I pretty much go what I have, like one low quantity of, but also what quality I have of. So if I have like great quality Dramai cards, but low quantity of them, then I will go Dramai. That's kind of like where I sort of like pick my lane with. And if I have to pivot, my, I guess, philosophy at the moment is pivot to Fi, because if I did not go Iyslander right away, essentially. Yeah.
Definitely. How about you, Tyler?
Yeah, so I came into this knowing my local meta. We'd done 8 or 9 drafts already, 2 weeks in, and I knew that people didn't like Iyslander, and so I went in. I was going to force Iyslander. I was going to evaluate the pack, and if I get the right pack, then I'm just gonna go for it. And so usually if there's like 1 or 2 blues that are wizard in the first pack, and one of them's ice, then that to me is a very confident I'm gonna force Iyslander because you're not passing very many good Iyslander cards, so the people to the left of you probably aren't gonna go Iyslander, as well as you're already starting on ice blues, and so once that happens, once your first 4 or 5 picks are ice blues, you can be comfortable going some other picks later on. Whereas other people who draft Iyslander, they don't focus on the blues right away. They focus on maybe some other stuff like poppers or just other cards because they stay open. Whereas if you're forcing her to begin with, you already have a jump start on every other Iyslander that's in the pod. And so you can be more flexible with your later picks. So that was kind of my strategy. I was just gonna, first 2 or 3 picks, I was gonna go Iyslander and see if I was still getting the ice blues, and I kept getting the blues, and so I just kept picking them. I think one pod, the first round, I ended up with like 18 blues, and like 16 of them are ice. It was crazy. And then the second time was a little bit worse, but I had 6 singes in my deck, so that helped out a lot. And so I was really proud of my strategy after that. And then, yes, that's some of the things I was looking out for. Just going into the draft with the mindset that I want to play Iyslander. I'm going to force it from the beginning. And then reading the signals coming in, telling me, yes, it was okay that I did that. And then sort of like a high risk, high reward mentality. You get rewarded for your first couple picks. You pick the blue Aether Hail, blue Cold Snap, that stuff early. You get rewarded for that later on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely good. I'll echo both of you guys. For me, what Hasiel said about sending signals for me has always been the biggest thing that I pay attention to when drafting. And you could even do this back in Tales of Aria as an aside. Just like as a quick example, if you pass like the Ranger hood to the left, what you can do is pick the strong Earth cards, because what this means is um, someone to your left is going to end up on Ranger. They'll probably be picking like Ice and Lightning cards. You can start picking Earth and then figure out which Earth hero to go into. Things like that happen in Tales of Aria. And then similarly in Uprising, if you open like a red Blaze Headlong and then a red 0 for 3 go again and a red 1 for 4 go again as your ninja cards, there's a really high likelihood that someone to your left is also going to end up on ninja. So this can punish you on pack 2 because the whole pack you're getting cut. Of course, you can't control what the people to your right are doing, but making sure that you don't get cut by someone immediately to your left on pack 2 is very important in this draft. In this draft format, I think. So I definitely agree that that was an important thing to pay attention to going in. And then we can talk about the thing with forcing heroes later, because I think it's actually a very valid strategy in Uprising. But yeah, just knowing your local meta is an interesting one. Going into the Nationals draft specifically, it's going to be interesting because it's going to be all random. So we'll probably have to figure out what we're going to do about that and go back to some normal drafting. But like always, knowing your outs to winning is like half of winning the game. You always got to find your edge. So if you have a local meta where like everyone overpicks Fi, even if like some people are picking Iyslander, if they're overpicking Fi, there's going to be a bunch of diluted Fi decks, and you can punish them with Iyslander, and you can even punish them with Dromai. Like if it's a really diluted Fi deck, like if there's 5 Fis at the table, and you have the 1 and 2 cost Senepais in your deck, like you're actually putting out a lot of damage and being able to block in between. So yeah, that's definitely an interesting thing to know for your local events. But yeah, overall, I felt like we had a lot of good practice of draft going into the Road to Nat season, so I was pretty happy that we were able to get through that.
One of the things that we really focused on in our practicing was identifying a trap pack, and that's going along the lines of what you're saying with knowing what you're passing. There's one draft we did where I opened like 5 wizard cards and like 4 of them are blues. And I was just like, nope. So I didn't go wizard. Sure enough, like the 2 people left of me both went wizard. And I guarantee if I still would have picked one of those wizard cards, they both would have went wizard still. Just because they both thought it was wide open when it wasn't. And so, yeah, identifying, sometimes you may have like the best pack ever for a certain hero that turns out to hurt you in the end, because that best pack ever still becomes a really, really good pack for the next 2 or 3 people down the line. Yeah. And so then you just all hurt each other. And so that's knowing when to pass the really good pack is also key. So that's why when I was looking out for my Iyslander packs, I was like 2 blues max, and then I'm not sending Iyslander signals down the road. So that's key when drafting Iyslander, especially because she's the only wizard, and you have to completely pivot to new cards with her.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, the last thing I want to talk about is just like our overall kind of thoughts and opinions on Uprising Draft as a format, and then how you're going to be thinking about it going into Nats. So Tyler, did you pick up any like specific learnings that you hadn't realized before, or maybe like an archetype that you hadn't seen, or just kind of how are you feeling about draft in general for Uprising?
I really like Uprising Draft. I think it's the best, if not second best, only to the WTR draft that LSS has produced. I do think that the heroes are a little too rock, paper, scissory than we would like to see. Like, there's a strong advantage for Fi into Dromai, and then there's a strong advantage for Dromai into Iyslander, and then not so much a strong advantage, but still an advantage for Iyslander into Ninja. And so I guess I would have liked to see more counters to those decks in this set, rather than just it being this deck beats that, which beats that, which beats that. It makes going into your bad matchups a lot harder to navigate. So that's my only complaint with the set. But besides that, I love it. It's a great competitive set. It rewards everyone at the table for knowing how to draft, for doing the right thing in draft, which can also be a burden in your locals too, right? If you're playing with people who, love Fi and they only draft Fi, or love Iyslander, they only draft Iyslander, you have to know those things about your locals. But in a big format like a national setting, it's going to be really cool to see what happens because Fi is definitely going to be the most popular, but he also can have 4 people draft Fi at the table and still be good. Like
Yeah.
I think the ideal layout for a draft is 4 Fi, 2 Dromai, 2 Iyslander. If that happens, I think that the table is very balanced and anyone can win at that point. But yeah, like I said, my only complaint is that if you get matched up against your bad matchup, like it's gonna be hard for you to win that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like the draft and I love the heroes. I love the way they balanced it with the ice and the draconic. I wasn't sure how it was gonna go with only 1 ice hero and 2 draconic heroes. I think they did a pretty good job with the balance of it and everything. So I think it's gonna be a good test of skill at come national season.
Yeah, I definitely agree. What about you, Jasiel?
Yeah, I'm also like similar. I agree with Tyler on a lot of the points for sure. I think this is actually my favorite set to draft in general, to be honest. I just like really love like it can definitely be rock paper scissors at times, but I also feel like this is like the draft set that rewards you for being the more skilled drafter, more so than even other kind of previous draft set. And the reason being is because I think previous draft sets like had these sorts of cards that like help um balance out the skill curve sometimes, where even if like you were the better drafter, you had these cards that made a more even playing field for people. Or like Tales of Aria, where like um even if you drafted the best, that was more rock paper scissors to me compared to Uprising, for example, just because
Hmm.
of how one-sided the mechanics of hero to hero was. Whereas in Uprising, I've sometimes even felt like if I drafted really correctly, even my worst matchup I could still beat, and that was just due to basically like how you said earlier too, like let's say maybe diluted pools, like diluted 5 pools, and even then I felt like I had hope as Dramai beating fives in certain situations, you know. So I like that about Uprising a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely have enjoyed drafting Uprising. I don't know if I'm as high on it as you guys are, but I have definitely appreciate like the factors of the format that make it the way it is. The idea it's interesting when you think about the idea of like being able to force a hero, and just as like a math aside, just for fun, if you go into an Uprising draft and everyone just randomly decides I'm going to force this hero, everyone actually has a 33% chance of choosing the hero that's theoretically correct for their seat to choose, because they're only choosing from 3 heroes. If you go into Welcome to Wraith draft and you say you want to force a hero and you start picking like hero class cards, you're only going to have a 25% chance of choosing the right hero. And obviously that's balanced by Welcome to Wraith having like more generic cards. And even though Welcome to Wraith it doesn't have like talented cards, you know, like Slogism is going in Rhinar and Bravo, and Razor Reflex is going in Katsu and Dorinthia. So like there's more ways to stay open in other formats. So while you stay open less in Uprising, there's also more class cards in the pack. Like there's only 3 cards in the pack that can be either generic, ice, or draconic. So there's a lot more class cards in the pack, which also means that you can read signals better. So while it's true, I think it's true that forcing a hero is a little bit more rewarded in this draft format. I also think that it's just designed for that to like happen, because if everyone stays open, you can only like if everyone is actually staying open, not including the rares and equipments because they're completely random. If everyone stays open, you can only stay open for 3 packs because everyone's going to pick the generic, the draconic, and the ice card, and then all of a sudden there's only class cards left. So like if you look at it that way, you actually do have to commit by pick 4. Obviously the rares and the equipments increase that by like 2 or 3 if either of those is a generic card, like maybe Quelled Boots, or like a good rare or something like Findal's Fighting Spirit yellow. But yeah, I do think that makes it a little bit more balanced, and it kind of makes up for the fact that you're encouraged to force. So I've seen a lot of people that say like because you are encouraged to force heroes in this draft, it makes it bad. But I think it just makes it different from the other formats that we've had. And it's something that instead of being like annoyed about it. You should probably just embrace it and realize that if you go in knowing that if you force earlier rather than later, or at least commit earlier rather than later, it's just a lot more rewarding. But yeah, I think that being said, I've definitely enjoyed drafting Uprising a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Forcing a hero, I think, in this format is good. It's for Fi and Iyslander. Dromai, I don't think should be forced. But with Fi, like if 4 people at the table can be Fi and still do pretty well. Like my finals table, there were 5 Fi, 2 Dromai, and 1 Iyslander, and I lost to a Fi in the finals. Like a Fi still won.
Yeah.
Like if you can have 4 Fis, then forcing Fi, you have a 50-50. You know, you can usually do pretty well. But this set rewards committing early because there's, like you said, there's not a whole lot of generic stuff to go with. But also you got to know when to pivot. So you need to pivot. You need to be pivoting by pick 4 or 5, which this set doesn't give you a lot of time to read signals, but you can read signals faster in this set than in previous sets. And so you should also be aware of when to pivot, and pivoting in this set can be pretty easy because you just default to Fi, or even Dromai if you were going Fi, or even out of Iyslander. So so overall, it's great. I enjoy the draft, and it's just a really good set. So I'm really proud of what they did, and it's fun to open too.
Oh yeah, that's very true. The fact that everyone has to announce when they open a cold foil at the table, it's like completely unnecessary because that's not a draftable card. I don't do you know why they made that rule actually?
It's value drafting. So you don't you don't open like a cold foil legendary,
right?
And be forced to pass it. That happened to me at Nationals. Someone passed someone else a cold foil Ram's Head because they didn't want it. Well, my opponent got a Ram's Head and they were Guardian, so I got destroyed. So that's that's why.
I mean, why do you think they made the rule that you have to announce that you got a cold foil? Because I agree that it's very good to discourage the value drafting, and it's like a feel good moment for you to open the cold foil and keep it. But is there a reason for them to make you announce it to the table?
Maybe accountability. I don't know.
Interesting. But yeah, the last thing I wanted to also bring up with the the Uprising draft format as a whole was, given that forcing heroes early, at least I'm going to start saying committing, because forcing is kind of has a negative connotation. Committing very early to the hero you're playing, you're rewarded also by going in and knowing how you're going to sculpt your deck. I think in other formats like Tales of Aria, you could have multiple archetypes. Like you could be a more lightning or ice leaning Lexi, for example. And then with Uprising, I think there's like actually pretty strict like guideline that you want to build your deck around. For example, when I build Fi, I want to have like around 8 blues, maybe 2 more that I can put in the sideboard for if I'm playing against the Iyslander, and then like maybe no more than like 5 or 6 yellows, and then the rest just like straight gas reds. When I'm building Iyslander, I want to have like 12 blues, maybe a couple more, as high as like 15 or 16 can be okay if they're like the good ice ones.
I do 15 to 18 blues for Iyslander.
Oh wow, yeah. Maybe that's why you're winning on Iyslander. I'm
not ideal,
actually.
you get 2 per hand at 16. So
yeah. But that's just the other thing when you go to when you're committing to a hero, start keeping in mind like the cards that are missing from your deck, and then the kind of quotas that you're trying to hit with your deck building picks and stuff. But yeah, Jasiel, did you have anything else to add, like about the format in general, what you're looking forward to with Nats?
Only like just kind of like a comment, but I think it's really funny, like trying to hide the dragon since they're dual sided. I remember actually like picking a dragon, and I was like, I have to hide it, but I'm not very like I'm very nonchalant, or the opposite. And I'm just like, the guy in front of me is like, huh, like he kind of did a comment, and I was like, yeah, I'm not very subtle. So it's very funny.
Yeah.
Whenever I pass a pack with a dragon, I always put the dragon on top.
Oh my gosh,
that's just what I do.
Yeah, that's actually a good call out though, Hasiel. For anyone that doesn't know, you can start, no matter whether you're drafting a dragon or not, you can start your Uprising draft with a token like a bauble or just anything in front of you, and put your cards underneath it from the start. If you only do it when you draft dragons, then people are going to realize you're only doing it because you're drafting dragons. But I actually just started doing it every time. It's just good practice, I think. But people should definitely know that. I think when Nats comes around, they're going to have the packs opened and replace them with token cards, like the list with check marks potentially. But yeah, for anyone watching, that's a good note for you to bring home to your drafts for Uprising. But yeah, I think that's all for us. I appreciate you guys watching. Leave a comment if you agree or disagree with anything we said, and also how you feel about the Uprising draft as a whole, how you did in your road to Nats, and if you're looking forward to the Nationals draft as well. Go ahead and subscribe and like, and we will see you next time.